You're listening to the Jōrni Podcast. Is your biological age actually the least important number in longevity? Join me for today's intriguing exploration of our health and well-being. Hi, I'm Petra Brunbauer. What if everything we've been told about holistic health, healing, and well-being is only part of the story? Because thriving in today's world looks different than it used to. Here, we challenge the narratives, rethink what it means to become human, and explore how that shapes the way we lead, live, and step into our full potential. This is the Jōrni Podcast. Welcome to today's episode. Once we get curious about longevity, we might come to the conclusion that despite taking supplements, sleeping well, exercising, and watching our diet, something else is still missing from the picture. Surprisingly, how old we feel may actually be more important than how old we physically are. Dr. Srini Pillay is Chief Medical Officer and co-founder of Reulay, an AI-driven digital therapeutics company that enhances well-being and extends health span by shifting mindset to reduce the risk of chronic disease. A Harvard-trained psychiatrist, brain researcher, and biotechnology consultant, Dr. Pillay is widely recognized for his groundbreaking work in psychogenic longevity, the science of using mindset to improve health span and lifespan. After graduating as the top medical student in South Africa, he completed his psychiatry residency at Harvard's McLean Hospital and spent 17 years conducting brain research at Harvard while directing both the Outpatient Anxiety Disorders Program and the Panic Disorders Research Program at McLean Hospital. A pioneer in psychogenic longevity, Dr. Pillay merges cutting-edge neuroscience with ancient wisdom to help people upgrade their brains in an age of AI and expand consciousness. Here is my interview with Dr. Srini Pillay. Hi, Srini. It's so great to have you on the podcast today. I've been looking forward to getting to chat with you because you have a super interesting topic for us today, psychogenic longevity. I feel we haven't even had this topic on the podcast before, so I'm very excited that you're here today to share more about that. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much, Petra. I'm excited to be here and excited to share my ideas around this topic of psychogenic longevity.
Yeah, I feel that as we are becoming more educated, more interested, this is definitely something. And I also want to say more unhealthy as we are consuming foods that aren't healthy and maybe pursuing habits that aren't too healthy. Longevity, of course, is something that we are likely all interested in. So thank you so much for being here today. And for starters, would you like to share maybe a little bit about your own journey or story or the parts of it that you feel connect to what you do today and a little bit about what it is that you do today?
Sure. I'd be happy to do that with one caveat. I think the caveat is that being a psychiatrist and brain scientist, I'm very aware of how distorted memory is. And I'm aware that the stories that we tell ourselves about our lives are often not exactly what happened. The story that I'm telling you is a story from today. The facts are likely to be true, but the connections, I'm not sure of. So I was born in South Africa during apartheid in South Africa, and I actually had a pretty remarkable existence there. My youth, as I remember it, was very enjoyable. I went to the University of Stellenbosch. I was the first person of color at the University of Stellenbosch. And then from there, went to Harvard Medical School, where I did a research fellowship, and then stayed on to do my residency at Harvard in psychiatry and became a brain scientist as well. I actually work in biotechnology across medicine, looking at drugs in early stage development for cancer, heart disease, stroke, and neurodegenerative disease. And then I also pioneered a field called neurocoaching, where I use brain-based principles to work with organizations worldwide, helping them build more resilient, agile, and creative teams that are able to operate in a world of complexity. I'm also a musician, and I've just finished writing a musical And I've co-founded a few tech companies. I'm very engaged in AI. I'm the chief medical officer and co-founder of Reulay, which is a video therapeutic company. And I'm developing a platform for psychogenic longevity, as well as numerous other tech projects. So I operate on the intersection of science, art, and technology. And if I had to, as a psychiatrist, hypothesize why my life is this way, I would say that growing up in a life of boundaries where apartheid kept different races separately, I think I probably figured out that the way to live in the world was by merging different fields and really not living within those boundaries. And whenever I speak about apartheid, I feel like I have a different take on it, meaning in me, I recognize that there are restrictions to that system of living, but I also recognize that there are lots of advantages in adversity. When I first came to America, I applied for the American Psychoanalytic Fellowship, and everyone said to me, "Oh, dude, you got this. Just Americans are so guilty about anything where there's adversity. Just tell them you grew up in apartheid and we'll get this." And I was like, I don't want to say that in that way. Like, sure, maybe I'm in denial and maybe my defense mechanism is to be happy about what I felt. But my memory of growing up in that existence was when I'd walk past a pool, for example, and I saw children playing in it, I would say to my mother, "I want to go into the pool." It should say, "You can't, darling, because that's for white children." And my memory of that existence was not, "Oh my God, I can't believe they won't let me go there." I would feel a droplet from the pool land on my skin, and I would vicariously live through whatever that sensation was. And I would feel like, wow, this is incredible, a forbidden land where I'm experiencing things that are not allowed. And I think that that kind of defense mechanism allows one to recognize that one can grow in adversity as a result of that adversity by saying that was terrible and that was how I grew up. But honestly, my memory of growing up was that it was incredibly enjoyable because I had such a loving family. And when I applied, my story of going to Stellenbosch is interesting. I was at a game reserve and I was at a conference. And I'd just been to this talk where this guy was talking about water intoxication and schizophrenia, which at that point really excited me. I was like, oh my God, this guy's talking about the brain and mood states. And when I stood next to him afterwards, I was like, I have to say something to you. I said, "I just came to your talk. It was incredible." And he said, "Thank you." I said, "No, but I just have such a strong sensation. And I have to ask you, I feel like you can change my life." And he looked at me and he was like, "What do you like?" And I said, "I'm really interested in what happens in the brain and how people feel." We have a scholarship at the University of Stellenbosch. It's due tomorrow. We've never given it to a person of color, and we've never given it to anyone in psychiatry. So the chances of you getting it are pretty slim. But if you do get it, it will change your life. And so the next day, I actually submitted the application. He walked it over to the committee, called me a few hours later and said, "Congratulations and welcome to Stellenbosch." And when I went there, people were like, "Are you crazy?" Like my first language is English and my second language is Afrikaans. And they said, and I actually, like, even though it was not politically correct to love Afrikaans, I think if you grow up in a country and you understand the language of the country, I really liked just the language itself. So I went to Stellenbosch and people were like, "You're going to feel so odd." I mean, I remember going in the first day and I have a very expanded palate. I feel like I can eat anything. But when I went in, I was like, "What is this? Like crocodile, springbok?" Like, I thought if you eat beef, pork, lamb, and vegetables, you're all set. But I was like, I don't. And everybody looked at me, and people would ask me strange questions like, "Was I related to Gandhi?" But what was really funny about that was that within a couple of days, I realized that political systems do not define the nature of people themselves. That the people I was with were incredibly loving. They were all white. They were all amazing. I made some of my best friends in Stellenbosch. And so what I keep in my heart is an amazing sense of love for the way in which the world is constructed and how one can operate within those constraints. And I don't consider myself to be at a greater disadvantage than any other human being. I think whether you grew up like that, whether you grew up as a rich wasp in New York, every human being, I learned as a psychiatrist, but I think I even sensed then, is bound by, what Rousseau said, man is born free, but is everywhere is in chain. That there's this struggle that we have to be free is a ubiquitous struggle. And so I don't lean on my history as a way of needing to be accommodated. I feel like people that I encounter in general are incredibly loving. And I like to feel that love within myself, and I like to give that, and I adore receiving that as well. So that's some of my story and how I've come to be in the world.
Oh, thank you for sharing this. And wow, what a story you have and the experiences that you've had over these decades that this was happening. And I am really humbled that you experienced so much love in all of these situations. And I think maybe there is something fundamental to that in humankind, as you said, that we all have some kind of struggle that we are, no matter where we are from, what skin color we have, what culture we come from, what age we are, there's always something that will unite us just as human beings. Yeah, but thank you for sharing that and such a wonderful insight into what shaped you and what you experienced. Yeah, amazing. I take it that you became very interested in the brain as you received that scholarship and continued your journey in that direction. And part of that, of course, I'm guessing happened also when you came to the States later. How did your journey continue and what fascinated you in the field that you were in and continue your studies in?
I started out being incredibly fascinated by the brain because I was indoctrinated in a certain way into believing that all these organs are separate, a little bit like apartheid of the body. The brain is separate from the heart, is separate from the gut, is separate from your leg. But if you think about it just simply, you cannot move your right leg. You cannot move your right leg without using your brain. So it's pretty clear that if we think of the body in terms of apartheid, then we are actually separating out things that don't need to be separated. And slowly, we are evolving in this way. I feel like I started in psychiatry. I did 17 years of brain imaging research. I looked at brain blood flow. I used to, before my Twitter account was hacked, I used to describe myself as somewhere between martinis and meditation. So worldly, and I also really love what happens in the spiritual world and spiritual consciousness. And so meditation and martinis are two things that I rely on for just enjoying how life is. But again, both of those things are things that break down boundaries. And I think over time, I've recognized I found my home in this field of psychogenic longevity because what I've come to understand are two fundamental things. One is that when we talk about health span and longevity, everyone's obsessed with measuring biomarkers and spending hundreds of thousands of dollars trying to figure out how to track their sleep and track their biomarkers. Firstly, I don't have the patience for that. I admire people who do it because it's a kind of attention to themselves. I think if I did that every day, I'd probably drive myself crazy. But what I do like to think about is the fact that psychology is not this abstract thing that exists outside of the body. You know, when you think, when you feel, when you're feeling anxious, when you're feeling sad, these feelings are actually expressed as brain state. But these brain states are also interacting with your adrenal gland, with your gut, with your inflammatory cells, with your immune cell. And so over time, I've come to have a deeper understanding that what happens psychologically is incredibly important as regards how you age. And I'll give you an example of why I think this. Ellen Langer took 70-year-old men in their 70s, and she put them in an environment where they had to exist as if they were in their 50s. So they were just like watching shows they watched in their 50s, and they were listening to music that they listened to in their 50s. And she just wanted to see, is there going to be any difference? And what she found was when you, in your head, are 20 years younger, they had improved vision, they had improved hearing, and they had improved muscle strength, which indicated that the way you think about yourself actually influences your state of health. And subsequently, we've defined this particular variable called subjective age, which is how old do you feel you are? And I always half joke, when I lost track of chronological age at a younger age, I just don't believe in it. I believe life moves along and the earth does its own thing. It's like, what the earth does is not my business. It can do what it wants to do around the sun. What I want to do is feel alive while I'm alive. There's a variable called subjective age that has a better correlation with how healthy you feel when you're older than your actual chronological age. And it's interesting because most people in the world, there's actually a French institute, there's the Paris Psychosomatic Institute, that looks at the connections between mind and the body. And Pierre Marté, who's at this institute, found that there was this phenomenon that he called essential depression. And in medicine, essential means primary. It means we don't know what the cause is. And what he found was that people with essential depression have an absence of vitality. And vitality is one of the key variables to health span and to feeling healthy into older age. And what he found was that one of the characteristics of those people is that they actually were people who they lacked vitality and they were overly operational. They lived by checklists. They were like, let's do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And their words were underinvested with emotion. The emotions and words were not connected at all. And so what he found was that those people were more susceptible to more cosmetic surgeries, more medical problems. So when your words and emotions are not aligned, the fact that that connects to medical problems is very interesting. And it's backed up by research that shows that emotional suppression correlates with a higher rate of mortality 12 years later. And that people who are emotionally suppressed may have higher rates of cancer, and there's a trend towards higher rates of cardiovascular disease as well. So I'm very fascinated by the idea that we can shift our mindsets in order to improve our health. And why not do that? So there's a lot to dig in. There's the whole effects of placebo. There's the 9 mindsets that actually can help you live more healthily into older age. I'll leave it up to you to define the direction of the rest of this conversation.
Wow, this is so fascinating. And thank you for sharing all of that, because I feel that as you are talking about this, it gives me a lot of hope for the future because I feel it's not predestined that we have to get old and, I want to say, non-functional and depressed about our age. We have a choice and a say in that. And when we talk about mindset, of course, this is something that we can affect and we can work on and we can work with. So I feel this is actually so empowering that you are sharing this. And I do feel that for our listeners as well, this is something when we talk about aging, there's the make sure you build muscle and make sure you do this and that so you don't get Alzheimer's. But really fundamentally, what you're saying is that there's actually probably a lot more that we have choice and agency over than we think we do. And a lot of it starts in our head. I find this fascinating. And I would love to actually dig in a little bit more into how people could apply what you are sharing in their own lives, because I'm mid-40s now, so I'm not really thinking too much about what I will look and feel like in my 70s and 80s, but yet probably that change already starts now. So when I think about that now, this is still something really important, even though I'm not quite there yet. So for our listeners as well, right, I feel this could be amazing to know about. What can we do now, even maybe in our 30s, 40s, 50s, that we can expect to have better longevity later on?
I'll speak to this first generally and then also specifically. So I used to run the outpatient anxiety disorder service at Harvard and McLean Hospital. So I have a sort of a feel for what happens when people are stressed out and anxious. The first thing I would say is that stress can be very helpful. And when it is helpful and you think of it as helpful, it actually is good for your physiology. You end up feeling like whatever stress you have. The first question you ask yourself is, how is this going to make my life better if I respond to it? A lot of times when we have stresses, we're like, oh my God, this is going to totally ruin everything. But if you say, how is this going to make my life better? You actually change your framework around stress. Positive stress is called eustress, which is EU stress. So it's stress that's good for your body. Negative stress is distress. And distress is not good for the body. Now, stress is one of the biggest killers because it can create epigenetic changes. It changes the way the molecules are inserted into genes. It changes the way cells are receiving messages. So the first thing I would say is think about how you manage stress. Now, one of the things that I study is what can you actually do to change the brain that's stressed? When you're stressed, there's a part of the brain called the amygdala, which can overly activate. Now, a lot of people talk about this these days, and it's a little oversimplified because the amygdala processes all emotions, and it's not the only part of the brain that's connected to how you process emotions. But one of the questions I asked myself was, what are some things that actually decrease the activation of the amygdala when you're stressed? Rather than just saying abstract things, what are things you can do? And so I have a paradigm. I talked about some elements of this in my book, Life Unlocked, 7 Revolutionary Lessons to Overcome Fear. But there are these 5 paradigms, 5 steps that you can consider. And it's defined by the mnemonic CIRCA, CIRCA. The first C is for chunking. So you get up on a Monday morning and you're like, oh my God, I have so much stuff to do this week. What am I going to do? How am I going to... We think we can keep all of that in our heads, but it stresses out the brain majorly. So what we should do is just take 5 minutes and say, what am I definitely, like, how do I break this down into pieces? What can I delegate? And how can I ruthlessly prioritize? What do I have to do? If I get to something, it'll be nice. And then what don't I have to get to? So the chunking is about breaking that stuff down, and it actually calms the brain down. Then there's ignore mental chatter. And ignore mental chatter is mindfulness. And mindfulness is essentially sitting back in your chair, and try this even as I'm saying it. Close your eyes, focus on your breath, and as you breathe in, focus on that. As you breathe out, focus on that. And what you recognize is that studies have shown that when you actually practice this technique, you decrease amygdala activation. And you might also improve your lifespan. So preliminary studies have shown that practicing mindfulness protects the telomeres in the genes. So at the end of your chromosomes, like think of them like shoelaces. There's this little, like the plastic parts of the shoelaces. At the ends of your chromosomes, you have these little things called telomeres. And the telomeres, as you get older, get shorter and shorter. And then you have disease and then you die. But for a lot of people, if you practice mindfulness, it protects those telomeres. So ignore mental chatter is an important piece of this. Then there's reality check. And reality check is simply self-talk. And self-talk can change the brain. And here, in this case, what it is, this too shall pass. Like you get terrible news, you're like, oh, okay, this is terrible, but it's going to pass. Something will happen and it's going to pass. And then the control check is about, which is the second C, is about what can I control, what can I not control, and how do I let go of that? So you get up on a Monday morning, you're like, oh my God, I can't believe there's a war here, or what's happening with the stock market, what's happening? Are you going to do anything with the stock market? Are you going to do anything with the war? Because if you're going to do nothing about them, why is this occupying space in your brain? So that's what the control check about. And Lady Gaga actually talked about this when she was at Yale. When she talked to students at Yale, she said, I reached a point in my life where I didn't want to sing anymore. People were, what do you mean? You're so good at this. She was like, I didn't want to, because doing that meant I had to make money for other people. It meant that I had to do things that I didn't really appreciate. I was like, I have to sell perfumes. I don't really love perfumes. And she said, and then I started to say no. I said, no, I don't want to do that. And she said, when I did that, I would go home and look at myself in the mirror. And then I would say, you, I can live with, because you have integrity. You're doing what you want to do. You're saying no to what you want to say no to. And not everybody can have Lady Gaga's life, but I guarantee there's one thing in your life that you do that you can say no to. And I was thinking about this in terms of myself, because I'm very open as a person, and I think there are a lot of advantages to that, but there are also a lot of disadvantages, because people feel like they can breeze in, breeze out, do whatever they want to do. And then suddenly I start feeling yanked around. And I was like, wait a minute, that's how they are. It's not their fault. It's my fault for saying that's okay. So once I started to say, no, not like insisting and fighting, and just like it doesn't suit my being to be in that world. I said, no, thank you. And once you start to say that, you're like, oh my God, I actually feel so much better. Like you have a loss of a connection, but you also have a loss of a connection that's causing you perturbation. So why do I want to be perturbed by that connection? And then the last A is attention shift, which is rather than talking about the problems, like everyone's, oh my God, the world is becoming like, think of a solution. Maybe you can attune your consciousness to the world. Maybe you can change how the world is. And so chunking, ignore mental chatter, reality check, control check, and attention shift are 5 simple things that you can do to manage your stress. Now, when we come to mindsets themselves, I won't go through all because I'll mention on the names and I'll go into 1 or 2 of them. So there's Focus, optimism. If you enhance these qualities, you will enhance your health span most likely. Focus, optimism, then confidence, awe, body awareness, connections to others, autonomy, resilience, and empowerment. So those are the mindsets that have research behind them that show their connection to health span. I want to say, though, that for those people who are a little bit skeptical about research, please be skeptical about research. Because as a researcher, I can tell you that facts, supposed facts, change all the time. And so the point of science is to investigate in a systematic way. It's not to declare the truth. And I think until recently, I didn't know how to find myself in this world. Because I'd go on the internet and people would be like, don't eat oxalates, eat this, eat meat, don't eat this, eat that. I was like, oh my God, what are these people talking about? And then I was like, you know what, I was very hardworking. I was competitive. I got into Harvard because I was at the top of my medical school class. In part, I was at the top of my class at Harvard. But so I studied hard. But at the end of it, I was like, I'm not comfortable with this guru position. I don't want to be out telling people what to do. Like, it doesn't seem like the right thing. What I really want to do is be something like an investigative journalist. Take all that knowledge, present the knowledge to people the way that I'm presenting it to you, but humbly recognizing that I do not know you and your physiology. So what I can do is present facts to you, and then you become an artist in your own life. You craft your life based on some of those facts. You're like, yeah, I want to do that. I want to eat this. I don't want to eat. On this day, I want to eat this. And the more you become engaged, I think using the science for artistic purposes in the crafting of a life is a much more sensible way to use science than just applying it in this kind of rigorous way. I'll give you a good example of this. So one of this is cholesterol, right? A lot of people, if you go to your doctor and your doctor says your bad cholesterol is high, your LDL cholesterol, everyone says you should lower the bad cholesterol. There are a lot of studies and a lot of reviews that show that when you lower bad cholesterol, you're more likely to die. So you're like, what do you mean? So the next time your doctor says lower your cholesterol, ask your doctor how they know which group you fall into. And I'm not saying you shouldn't, because there are studies that show that cholesterol can be a negative determinant of health. But I can't, as a doctor, tell you that I know your body, because I don't know your body. No matter how much I listen to your heart, no matter how many scans I do, yeah, I have a certain amount of knowledge about it, but I don't feel comfortable being a guru of someone's body. I feel comfortable being an investigative journalist, telling you information, reading the research, sharing the research. And so when you look at the research around mindset, focus, people with ADHD have twice the rate of death before the age of 46. Being able to manage your mind, and I think especially in this age where we're distracted by everything online, we're distracted by everything around us, it's important to be able to manage your mindset. Optimists have 11 to 15% longer lifespans. I think Talish Rose actually talked about this, how it can also be problematic, right? She said when you talk to divorce lawyers who are seeing divorced people all the time, when they find someone and they're going to marry them, and you ask them, what's the chance you'll be with them? They'll be like, 99%. As a rational human being, you're a divorce lawyer on top of that. You should know your chances are probably 50% or less. Why do you think that? She said optimism gets a lot of people into trouble. But recent studies have shown that having a positive orientation to life can actually improve your health span. Now, if you're someone listening to this and you're like, whatever, I don't feel positive, I would encourage you to have what I call existential confidence. And existential confidence is a commitment to a possibility that does not yet exist in reality, that you know you can deliver on, even if you have not delivered on it in the past. So I call myself, roughly speaking, Hindu because I grew up that way, but I'm like a beef and pork eating Hindu who's a pantheist. So I love all religions, because when I've actually read in high school the Gita, the Quran, and the Bible, and I was like, wait a minute, all these books are saying the same thing. Why do humans distort the messages to serve their own needs? And so one of the principles that I do adhere to in non-dualistic Hinduism is also divided within itself, is this idea of Satchitananda, which is being, consciousness, bliss. And what that really is that our fundamental nature, this is my hypothesis, is bliss. And when on a day-to-day basis we get up and we're not feeling blissful, I don't like to fake it. I'm not like one of those people who say, oh, it's so wonderful. I'm like, oh, God. I was like, why am I so distracted from my fundamental nature? And what can take me back to my fundamental nature? Because if my fundamental nature is bliss, and that's my hypothesis, anything that makes me not blissful is taking me away from who I am. So by optimism, I don't mean fake positivity. Dare to imagine your greatest self. Richard Boyatzis at Case Western University has actually done a lot of research to show how people can make intentional change. And one of the things he found is that intentional change is more likely when you understand your ideal self. Now, a lot of people just try to put out fires. They get up on a Monday, they're like, oh my God, I got to solve this problem, do this, I got to eat this, do this. No, just define very clearly who you want to be. Now, when I say this to people, they're often like, oh my God, what do you mean? I'm on a community called nas.io, nas.io, and I have a free ideal self guide, which allows you to fill that out. And when you fill that out, I actually at the end of it say, make that a PDF, feed it into ChatGPT or whatever LLM you're using, and ask it to give you a summary and ask it to draw a picture, because that'll give you a first idea of what you want to be like. And then you say to yourself, okay, I want to be this. How do I get there? And my experience has been most people who feed that into ChatGPT come out with a very generic thing. You're a very ambitious person who wants to be healthy, wealthy, and wise. It's like whatever. I say to them, you have more color to you than your LinkedIn profile. Like, I am not my bio. My bio is my bio. I feel like I am me, and the meanness of me is what I get to share in loving relationships. And that's what I love about the people I love. It's not their bios. I don't like their bios are a construct. So when you fill out the ideal self guide, make sure to add the little things that you love. I had this funny text chain yesterday with a group of friends. We have this side conversation. I was at the gym and there was a guy who was like wanting to use this, and I just finished with the machine, and I was with the trainer on FaceTime. And I was just gonna go get my mat and the AirX pad. And so he said, are you done with this machine? I said, yeah, I'm actually done. I was just coming to get my mat and AirX pad. And he said, oh, you don't gotta move that. I was like, don't gotta? That's like such an amazing kind of rough way of communicating. So I sent a text to my friend saying, what is it when you suddenly adore a human you don't know who says you don't gotta move something? I'm so moved by this, whatever this is. It's amazing how you can suddenly find a way of connecting to someone. And the one female in the group was like, she joked back when she said, oh, did he have a touch of psoriasis? Because you also have a soft spot for that. And she said that because the last time I saw someone with a slightly pink skin, I was like, oh my God, there's such a vulnerability in whatever's happening there. And I was understanding that. And so I said, if that had happened, I would have fainted. I was like, besides, I was already conjuring like a whole big literary thing. I felt he was thin in a certain way, and I think he liked pizza. I think he liked just cheese pizza, and I wasn't sure why, but I felt like I could forgive him for liking cheese pizza. And she was like, oh, for God's sakes, at least he could have pepperoni on it. And I was like, I would prefer that. But I think on top of that, he had a skull cap and he had headphones. I couldn't tell if it was related to a switchblade or cocaine. And the males in the conversation were like, I have no idea what's going on in this conversation. What is happening here? What are you guys talking about? And so I was like, I didn't have time. So I screenshotted the part of that conversation into ChatGPT. And I said, can you just explain in 2 minutes what's happening? And ChatGPT was like, you were moved by someone saying you don't gotta, because it's a rough way of speaking, but along with a caring sentiment. And that contrast is what somehow moved you. And you started to then conjecture about the personality of this person. And the female in the conversation joined you by adding psoriasis and pepperoni to the conversation. And the males wanted to be like, I don't know what you're talking about, because they didn't want to join you in abstraction. But that's where the divide happened. The divide happened because you were inviting them into abstraction and they didn't feel comfortable being in it. And when I said that to them, they were like, just, you're not allowed near your phone for the next 24 hours. Stop being there. But I'm giving you that example because there's a lot of opportunity to be moved by the world. If you just look around you, it's incredible what's around you. So optimism doesn't have to be forced positivity. I think it starts with observation. And through observation, you become aware of the poetry of life. I would say one other maybe like practical tip I could give for confidence is that if you're struggling having confidence, there are three things you can do. The first thing is affect labeling. Name the emotion. If you're feeling anxious but also excited, when you name it, it decreases amygdala activation. The second thing is from Daniel Wegner, who says he has this theory called ironic process theory, where he has shown if I say to you, I want you to think about whatever you want to think about, but do not think about a white elephant. It's very hard to not think about that. So he said, when people say do not do something, their minds do the exact opposite. And studies have shown, like in soccer players, if you put eye tracking devices in their eyes, if they're scoring a penalty, if they say do not kick the ball to the right, the eye goes to the right. So under stress, the brain does the opposite. So if you want to remain confident, rather than saying I must not get anxious, just say I must get calm. And then the third thing from Ethan Kross and his colleagues have found that if you're trying to pep yourself up, rather than saying I'm going to crush this, because when you feel nervous and you're like I'm going to crush this, your brain's like, yeah, whatever. You're not going to crush anything. You're completely nervous. But if you call yourself by name, and if I said, Srini, you're going to crush this, your brain recognizes at some level that, yeah, there's an anxious part of you, but there's also a part of you that can crush this. And so speaking in the second or third person and calling yourself by name can improve your confidence. So hopefully some of those practical tips, I think overarchingly, use Circa for stress, have some kind of focus practice. For optimism, ask yourself, whatever situation it is, how can that serve me? And for confidence, use those three techniques. And those are some ways in which you can shift your mindset.
Wow, thank you for sharing these nuggets with us. I feel that you've shared so much wisdom, and our listeners can take away all of these pieces into their own lives and get started with dipping their toes in and working on their psychogenic longevity. Have that piece in there that maybe they're doing supplements and exercising and trying to sleep better. But of course, there's this huge other piece that they may not be addressing at all. So thank you so much for sharing all of that. I've been taking notes and I'll be practicing some of the things that you have shared with us. And I feel these are actually very simple things that we can add to our lives and even just interchange them and integrate them into the things we're already doing, right? So we don't need to have another 3-hour practice on top of everything else. We can integrate this. We can make this work even when we're really busy. And I think that is one of the things is when we're told, now you need to add this, or now you need to add that, guess what happens? You create more stress for yourself. So yeah, I appreciate you making this really simple and straightforward with things that we can all do and all add. So I will thank you at this point for joining me today and sharing all of these wonderful wisdom pieces with our listeners. And if they're really curious now and they want to know more, how can our listeners connect with you? Do you have any programs, services, resources available for them? How can they reach out, Srini?
Thanks so much, Petra. So the first thing I would say is the easiest way to connect with what I'm saying is I post daily on Instagram at Dr. Srini Pillay. I'm also at that same handle on Substack and also on LinkedIn, on X, and on Facebook or Meta. The second thing I would say is that I have a few books. My last book is Tinker, Dabble, Doodle, Try, Unlock the Power of the Unfocused Mind, which is not just about taking a break. That circuit that gets activated when you are unfocused is actually a circuit that's affected in all states of disease. So learning how to practice that focus, unfocused piece, not just adding, but knowing when to subtract, is super important. And I've also written a book called Life Unlocked, 7 Revolutionary Lessons to Overcome Fear, and a book called Your Brain in Business, The Neuroscience of Great Leaders. I've also recently just released a course called Implementing the Science Behind the Law of Attraction, in which I talk about how you can actually rely on science to engage the law of attraction. And just to prove it to myself, I did the course. It's a video course. It's just 3 minutes a day of the video, 1 minute of reflection and 1 minute of exercise for 5 days a week. Then you take 2 days off and you go to and it's for 8 weeks. What I found was I was like, if this course really works, I'm at a point in my career where this should work for me. So why don't I take the course? And I'm in the 7th week right now, and it is working wonders. It is amazing to me. I'm like, because I was like, what if this doesn't work? And all of a sudden I'm getting calls from everywhere, feeling connected in a way that I wanted to feel connected, that I don't feel connected. And I was like, wow, this actually does work. I think I'm going to retake the course as well. So I'm implementing the science behind the law of attraction is something that I feel super interested in. Hopefully you'll have it in the notes and I'll send you the link. And I think social media and reading my books and listening to the courses is a great way to start. I also hold, we're opening up a private club in Palm Beach called the Society. And it's extremely reasonably priced. If you look at general weekends at any other major institution, they're like $20,000 for one weekend. You get 3 weekends plus 12 online recordings, plus hotel discounts at the Amrit Ocean Resort for an initiation fee of $5,000 and then $12,000 after. So it's pretty reasonable compared to most things like that. We have the Society, and if you don't think you're going to make it to Palm Beach, we have a thing called the Society Online, which is much more reasonable. But we have these retreats where people can... I've moved away from just lecturing at people all day into doing a little bit of speaking, but then having them be immersed, either in sound baths or walking or being at the gym or being with a professional trainer. And they have 100,000 square feet of spa space. So there's a lot of different things you can do, from salt therapies to cold immersions, warm immersions. You don't have to believe in all of them. Figure out which of those suits you and then take that on. So I like being able to be not just in the technology world. And Reulay is the app that I co-founded that's out there that I think it would be great if you signed up to it, because it provides video therapeutics on a day-to-day basis. But I think being able to be in person amongst like-minded people who care about healthspan, and not this noise that's in the media right now, which is do this and you'll get better. Nobody knows what you should do. What people know is the research. You are the artist and creator of your own life. Please remember, that would be my major message that I would have to anyone.
And I won't even add anything to that other than you can find all of Srini's offerings in the show notes. So check below this episode. We'll have everything linked there for you so you can find all the things that he just shared with you now, the resources, the memberships, the course, the books. We'll make sure we have a link to all of that. And like I said, I don't even want to add anything else that distracts our listeners. So thank you so much for sharing that and for being here with me today. And thank you for bringing this wisdom into the world. And thank you for the work that you do. I feel this is so hugely important. And of course, for all of us to find our alignment and our joy in life, our happiness and our longevity. So thank you so very much for joining me today.
Thank you for having me, Petra. I really appreciate your spreading the message as well.
Yeah, it was my absolute pleasure. And thanks everyone for tuning in today. I really appreciate it. Take care of yourselves and be well. Thank you so much for taking time out of your day to listen in. If you enjoy the Jōrni Podcast, please support us by subscribing, sharing on social media, and leaving us a review. We appreciate you. And you can find more of The Jōrni on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, and our website, thejōrni.com. Sending you love and courage, and see you next time.